Alright, so what we have here is from our particular kit. Your kit might be different, depends on what you get. So don't necessarily follow everything we do step for step. Follow your instructions for whatever came with your kit. But we have a back plate, and then we have these screws and a plastic washer that then go through it. And then on the other side, they're held in place by another plastic washer and a nut over on this side. And here we go for that. So this just kind of holds it in place until you can get your water block in place. So that's the back plate installed, along with the mounting screws for the CPU block. So now we can lay it down and get the CPU block installed. So what we have here is our hardware installed in the Fantex Enthoo Pro case. It was reviewed on the MNPC Tech channel not too long ago. We went with this case because it's a reasonably priced case. It's got a lot of good features for water cooling, and it would be a pretty good computer case for somebody who's just getting into water cooling, because you're not going to have to really do anything to install a water cooling kit. So that's what we have set up here. We've already installed the back plate on the CPU, so the next thing would be to get the CPU block installed. So first things first is we're going to put the thermal paste on the CPU, and the way I do it is I just do a small dot in the middle, and if you ask different people how they do it, you'll get all kinds of different responses. So we're not going to get into that. This is how I do it. You do it however you want. As long as you have some there, you'll be okay. So I just have my dab in the middle, and then you'll want to carefully remove the plastic film that comes on the water block. And then try not to touch it after you remove that, because you don't want any of the oils from your hand or anything like that to get onto the water block. And so now is when you kind of need to pay attention to where your inlet and outlet ports are. On this one, the inlet is right in the middle and the outlet is on the outside. And so what we've decided is we're going to put the radiator in the roof and put the ports towards the front, and then the reservoir is going to be down in the bottom bay. So it probably makes more sense to have the two ports being, you know, one on top of the other instead of sideways. So that's what we're going to do.
I would suggest let's go with the end towards the top of the case. Why? We'll discuss that in the follow-up video.
Yep.
That way, if you want to, well, main reason is if you want to install or add on a GPU, it's easier to go out this way into a GPU compared to looping over and jumping around.
Yep, but if you're doing just a CPU loop, it doesn't matter a whole lot. I mean, it won't matter from a performance standpoint. It's just an ease of routing tubing, and you know what you need to get to go to where is where that really matters. But so then we just kind of set that on over the screws. Then I usually give it a little press and a little bit of a wiggle to kind of work some of that thermal paste around. And then the kit comes with 4 washers. This one says that it goes washers, springs, and then thumb nuts. So I will assume that they know what they're doing, so I will follow that. Now something that I do is I usually apply these in opposite directions. So I start in one corner and then I go over to the other. And this is where it'd be a little bit easier when the case is standing upright, but you might have to hold the screws on the back side in order to tighten them down. But I like to go opposite because then you don't have the water block all of a sudden popping up really high on one side, and then it turns into a pain to try and get the other side down. And then I usually get all 4 of them installed partway before I get to tightening them down finally. Just because then if there's anything that has to wiggle or anything that needs to move, you don't have to loosen a bunch of stuff in the process. Okay, and then with these you don't have to crank them down all the way until you bottom out or anything like that, but just a sufficient tightness so that you don't have to worry about anything moving or anything coming undone. I mean, it's all screwed together, so it's not going to go anywhere anyway.
So what are we doing here, Chris? Why are we? I thought water cooling was cooling what the water inside. Why are we at a sink?
Well, not all manufacturers have completely perfectly sterile environments. So what we need to do is rinse it out. Kind of give it a little bit of a rinse and shake some of the stuff out that might be in there. And distilled water is good for that because it's really cheap. Remember, not tap water.
Yeah, because if you use tap water to rinse, but you're cleaning contaminants by using more contaminants. So,
So what we have is I just have a barb and a short piece of tube. I mean, I use that for filling all the time, but we could also just as easily use a funnel straight into the port. I mean, it doesn't matter that much, but
to kind of fill it up halfway, the way I did was, as I was pouring here, I could see some water start to pool on the other side. That's my way of seeing, okay, I got decent amount of water in. You don't want to overfill or underfill, just 40%, 50%.
Yep, because you still want to have a little bit of airspace, because then what you want to do is either if you have stop plugs, like these come with 4 of them, but there's 6 ports, so if you have more stop plugs you could use those. Otherwise I just use my thumbs and cover the portholes and then just kind of give it a shake, just in case there's any loose junk in there, just to kind of dislodge some of that. Yeah, that would suck. Whack. And then just kind of let it drain. One thing to kind of note though is be careful when you're handling this. You don't really want to grab it like this, because you don't want to bend any of these fins, because if you start bending fins closed, then it's going to restrict your airflow, which is just going to reduce the effectiveness of the radiator.
Yes. But if you accidentally bend some, don't panic, don't freak out. You can normally just take something and gently put them back in shape.
Yep, especially with these lower fin density radiators too. You get into some of the like 20 fins per inch, and that might be a little bit more of a pain, but then again, you think about how many there are. One's not really gonna do too much damage, but there we go. Now we're ready to go.
So with the radiator ports facing the front, water comes outlet of the bay reservoir, goes in here or any of these ports, out the one, into our block, and out and back to the reservoir. So it'll be a quick, simple loop with not too many things sticking out or wasted tubing.
Okay, so with our kit we have a DDC pump and a bay res, and the way this works is the barbs on the pump just kind of go into these rubber grommeted holes here, the inlet and outlet from the pump, and what I've done is loosen the screws that were underneath it a little bit, just so I have a little bit of play to get over that lip. And then the kit comes with a little rubber pad that fits underneath the pump here, and that's just to kind of dampen some of the vibrations. But so what I'm going to do is put this down over here on the little bracket, and then now these just slide in, slide forward. Kind of need to wiggle a little bit, but and then kind of push that in place, and then now this can come back up. So then there are just a couple of screws that come with the kit. And they also provide some plastic washers and a nut that goes on the inside here. Which is hard to do with big fingers. And then once those two are installed, you just tighten these back up. Keep everything in place. So there you go. Now you have your pump installed in your reservoir. And then I'm just sliding this into the bottom slot of the case. And then just kind of line up over on the back side. There's a couple of screw holes that I can see from over here since everything is transparent. But get those lined up because you'll be using screws for that. On this side there's a quick toolless, but it doesn't really matter because it doesn't hit the reservoir, so don't worry about that side. I mean, really all you got to do is keep it from moving too much, and 2 screws on the other side will be fine for that. And we have all of the fitting bases installed, all 6 of them, 2 on the pump combo, 2 on the radiator, and then 2 on the block. And I've already taken off all of the compression rings because I'm going to need to have those off in order to run the tubing anyway. So what we're going to do next is get our tubing lines run. Do it.
I'll cut the tube. You saw it, people. He tried to kill me.
Not seriously.
If something happens to me, blame him.
Not seriously kill, just gently kill.
Kill is a kill, man.
Alright, I'm just going to cut off the factory end to get a little bit cleaner of a cut. So what we have is all of our barbs now. The bases for the compression fittings are all installed. I've got the 2 on the reservoir, the 2 on the radiator, and the 2 on our CPU block. And then we have the tubing that the kit came with. I believe it's 10 millimeter by 13 millimeter, so that's roughly half by 3/8 for empirical measurements. But so what I have is a pair of cutters. I just got these at the hardware store. I think they're for PVC pipe originally, but they actually work pretty well for this as well. You don't necessarily have to have these. You can use just scissors, or I've seen some people just use a razor blade too, but as long as you get the ends pretty square, I mean, they don't have to be perfect, especially with compression fittings, because you don't usually see that end of it anyway, but as long as you get it relatively square, you'll be okay. And so what you'll want to do is kind of plan through your loop and figure out where you're going to run stuff. And what we've decided is we're going to end up coming out of our reservoir into the CPU, and then out of the CPU into the radiator, and then out of the radiator back into the reservoir. So what I'm going to do is just start out by putting the tube on here. I don't have my compression collar on yet because all I'm doing is cutting to size, but I'm just kind of using it to get a rough estimate of the length. And then once you kind of think you have enough, add just a little bit and then cut it off, because with most of these kits you get quite a bit of extra tubing, so you can afford to make a couple of mistakes or make a couple of extra inches here and there on your tube. But so like here, for example, it might be a little bit longer than what you want, but you can just take it back off and trim it. It's a lot easier to trim it to length than it is to go, oh, I wish I would have made that an inch longer. So basically you kind of want to have, at least for my taste, the least amount of tubing that you can without getting any kinks, because if you start trying to bend it too fast or too far, it'll get a kink and that'll restrict your flow. So I think I'm going to leave that one there, and then we'll get the rest of the tubing cut and put in there. Like I say in my woodworking, measure twice, cut once, and then sneak up on it anyway. That'll be long enough, I think.
Yeah, well, tubing will take it tighter bend, so.
Yep. All right, here we go.
So for the flow, you have to keep one thing in mind, that water should start going out from the pump, and the last thing it should go to is the reservoir, so it can go back to the pump. So the way we have this, we have our pump installed with the reservoir, and it's leaving out of the reservoir / pump combo, going straight to our CPU, goes in, comes out, goes to the radiator and the fan do their thing, cool the water down, and cooler water goes into the bay, and the pump keeps that cycle going round and round and round.
Included with the kit is a 24-pin jumper, and what you use this for is you can put it on the 24 pin or 20+4 of your power supply, and then you don't have to have it hooked up to the motherboard, and it allows you to power it on. And this is a good thing because then when you're filling it, you can use the Molex from your power supply, but you can disconnect it from your system, so you don't have to have the motherboard, the graphics card, all that stuff powered up. So just in case there is a leak, you don't have to worry about power being run through your hardware and then having that short circuit and fry it. So we'll just use this for filling, so that'll be the next step. So what I've done here is I've just sort of laid some paper towels out underneath all of the fittings and all the places where the tubing and various components meet, just so we can catch anything that might leak if we do have a leak and prevent it from getting on some of the hardware, and just kind of keeping a little bit easier if anything does go wrong, and gives you a visual if there is a leak. You'll see a wet spot on the paper towels.
But if you're using any dyes come in handy to spot the leaks easier, especially with white paper towels, so just a little tip.
We've got the coolant here ready to go. We have the power supply jumped, and now I'm going to connect the pump. So that's the only thing I have connected. I don't have anything else connected to it, obviously. So what I'm going to do now is fill up the reservoir as much as I can, and then we'll turn on the power supply, run the pump until it drops down till just before it starts to not have water supplied to the pump, and then turn it off and rinse and repeat. One thing, if you are going to use a funnel or something like that, to keep in mind is don't pour too much liquid into it right away, or you'll just end up trapping an air bubble, and then it won't go down the funnel and doesn't quite work as well. I've run into that a few times. Like that. Okay, now with our jumpered power supply and our reservoir full, we're going to just turn it on real quick until the water level drops. You can kind of see in this one, before it gets too low for that inlet back there for the pump, because it's really important to make sure that you don't run your pump until your reservoir is filled up, because otherwise you run the risk of burning out your pump right away, and that wouldn't be very fun.
With this design, it might be helpful to tip the case back a bit.
Yeah. Just lift up the front a little.
That way you give water some... Remember, you make sure you use gravity for your benefit.
Yeah, because on this one, what he's talking about is the inlet port is all the way on the bottom in the back. And so it'll be useful because then you can get more water there when you're running it, because otherwise it takes a while to fill up the loop. You ready?
Yep. Cut it out.
Air bubble. Put that on just because we're going to have to do a little bit of tipping and messing around.
This is where I love two reservoirs.
Yep. And just a standard standalone pump too is...
So one thing I like to do is tip it back and forth.
Yep. Because the issue that we're having right now is that the way that the pump gets water from the reservoir, it goes up first before it comes back down. So the issue that we're having is that there's just an air bubble right now that's getting in between the pump and the reservoir, so it's not getting any water. So you don't want to keep running it if it doesn't grab any water.
Okay, give it one more shot.
Nope.
I can see the water sitting right there. So what we're doing right now is we have the case tipped at a 90-degree angle. So if you are doing this, it's fine. As long as your pump is not upside down, it can be at any angle. You can have it, you know, sitting down straight, pointing up, but you don't want your pump pointing down because that means you have to feed in a very weird way, or just make sure your pump is always getting fed, and it cannot be upside down or pointing down. So give it a shot. Can't see the.
Was that a good guess?
Yep.
Because now it's, what we did there is just kind of briefly turned it on.
So it's kind of primed.
And so now we have our pump full of water at least. And so now we're just going to continue on filling. Because you want to make sure that you turn it off before you run out of water.
So what Chris is doing right now is he turns on the power supply for a brief moment, lets the water level go down a bit, and then we fill it up again. So we'll keep doing that till the water level stops dropping, and we can keep the pump on. So right now it's just running. Our water level seems to be stable.
Yeah, I mean there's going to be some air bubbles, as you can see through some of the tubes. There's some air bubbles running through it still, so it'll drop a little bit, but it's not a very significant. I mean, there's not a significant amount of air in there anymore.
No.
So what I'm going to do for now is put the top back on the reservoir, and we can just sort of shake it around a little bit, move some of the air.
So the best way to tell if you still have air bubbles is listen for it. That sound is the sound of air bubbles.
Yep.
Might want to add some more. Just gonna. Our loop has been running fine, so now we're just gonna drop in a GPU. We're not gonna water cool the GPU yet. We will be doing that later. Just gonna loosen my thumb screws so I can get those out. Now typically I do recommend that you leak test your loop for about 24 hours just in case that leaks or something later pops up. Other thing I would recommend is, let's say you're leak testing, let it run for about a couple hours, turn off your pump, let it sit for about an hour, and then turn it back on. That way, if there's any leaks or anything that might happen once the water is not in motion, if there's a dead spot or something, you might catch that. And it also helps get rid of air. So the water comes out, goes straight to the CPU, in, leaves the CPU, goes to the radiator. Radiator does its thing of making sure it's cooled. Goes back out from the radiator into the reservoir, back into the pump, and the pump keeps doing its thing. And now you have your own custom loop running. The best part about these loops is if you want to add something down the line, you just drain the water out. We'll talk about that in our next video. You drain the water out, change your tube routing. So potentially what we will do is take the out, have it go straight into a GPU. If you have another GPU, it can go to another GPU, and then from there it will go back into the pump, to the reservoir or a radiator. In the next video we're going to talk about how to drain a loop, how to add a GPU or another radiator. So we are going to expand this loop, add a couple GPUs to it, so that way you get an idea as to what are the benefits of starting with a kit and then adding on to it by just buying extra radiators or GPU blocks. Chris, anything?
Yeah, because if you want to expand, you'll be able to use everything you have here. You just have to get some more tubing. And other than that, if there's any questions, if you want to leave a comment or head over to the Mod Zoo, I'm sure we'll have a thread started by the time we're posting this video. So we'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have there.
And I would like to mention, if you go over to themodzoo.com, Jay Werner, aka X9, did a nice guide on how to do a water cooling. So if you're into reading, go take a look at that, watch the video. Have any questions, feel free to ask us, leave a comment, and like Chris said, just go over to the zoo and be a monkey. Stop recording!
for something bigger.
God. I wish the days are film.
Just do silent film, black and white.
You should do that. Oh my god, there's water everywhere.